So today's tutorial is to teach you how you can sew snowflake bikini pattern or bra pattern, but made as a bikini. And so to start with, I already have my pattern pieces cut and ready, but I'm gonna show you what I have on my table. So to start with, you can improvise whichever straps you want. I'm going to demonstrate today using the straps that are included on Bikini Pattern Top Winter or Swimsuit Pattern Winter, which is this strap here, which I've already cut it. But you can use thin straps, you can use whatever straps you want. You can even tie a bow on your shoulder in the middle and make them longer, so you decide. Today I'm gonna be using these as my straps. And so I have cut it 2 layers of my main fabric, and I've also removed the seam allowance on this edge and on these 2 edges on one of the layers. And this is because once I reverse them to the right side, I don't want to have excess fabric on the second side. So that's why I remove the seam allowances in this edge and on this edge also. Then I have here my cradle, which I cut it 1 entire pattern for the stabilizer fabric. This is a non-stretchy fabric, and it enables you to maintain your cups together and not spread apart. So this is stabilized. This is a fabric that doesn't stretch horizontally, and so it's called stabilizer. But then for my cradles and for my bridge here in the middle, I've cut 3 different pieces, but this is just because I didn't have enough fabric to cut all at once, so that's the only reason why I had to divide this in 3 pieces, and I actually had to add the seam allowance, so you know, the usual. Then of course we have our inner cup and outer cup, and I have cut it the main fabric and the lining, the second fabric. In this case, the main fabric will be this one, and the second fabric will be the purple. This is a non-reversible pattern. However, you can use the 2 layers of fabric, swimwear fabric. That's not a problem. If you want, you can also use on your second layer power mesh, strong power mesh, but it's up to you, okay? So this is my inner cup and outer cup on both fabrics. Then I have my upper cup already in my main fabric and my second fabric. And on my second fabric, I removed the seam allowance from the top edge of my second fabric. And this is just because we are going to sew the bikini top, the top edge, and also the top edge of our back bands in a way that you will not see any stitches visible. And to do that, and for you not to have excess fabric on your second fabric, you are only able to do that if you remove the seam allowance on your second fabric. And we will be applying on the side of our main fabric, and when we reverse it to the right side, it will be a perfect match. So I have here my upper cup symmetrics for both fabrics. And finally, as my back bands, I have my main fabric, and as my lining, I cut it white strong power mesh. This is very used to, this is used in bra making, and you have seen this probably on the tutorial for the bra pattern, for the snowflake bra pattern. But this is white. And also, just like I told you for the upper cup, I removed the seam allowance on the upper edge of my back band, again, to make a understitch that will hide my stitches all along the top edge of my bikini. And this is how we are going to sew this today. So let's start by assembling our pattern pieces and start sewing them. So for our straps, I can already place them right sides facing together, and you should see which is the right side of your fabric, of course. And placing them right sides facing together, I will be able to sew them together. And I will start by sewing one edge first and then the other. So I first pin the entire edge here, and I'm gonna sew it, applying the elastic on the side of the main fabric. So as I'm going to apply the elastic on the side of the main fabric, I rather pin with that side facing up on my table. It makes it easier for me not to do any mistake when going to my overlock to apply the elastic. Of course, the elastic is the rubber elastic, and I use 0.8 millimeters rubber elastic. I'm gonna repeat the same process for the other strap. So I'm gonna apply the elastic here and sew this, and then I'm going to align the other edge. Once this is done, I'm going to align the other two edges, this one and also this one, pin and also sew, applying elastic. Never mind that it will look like you have excess fabric on one of the sides, but I can guarantee that once this is reversed to the right side, you will have the perfect amount of fabric without bulkiness. So that's regarding our straps. Then for our bikini pattern top, here on the top, upper cup, again we will place right sides facing together. Let me check which is the right side. So this is the right side and this is the right side for this side. I always use my paper pattern pieces to make sure that I'm placing the fabrics on the correct position, because it's very easy for us to do a mistake at this stage and sew wrong parts of our fabric. So I'm checking, I haven't still removed the seam allowance on the second fabric because they are exactly the same size, so I'm gonna do it now. Maybe I forgot to do it, so I'm gonna go ahead and on the second side of my fabric I'm gonna remove the seam allowance on the top here. If you want, you can cut your paper pattern piece, you can cut the seam allowance and use it to cut the second layer, or as I do, I just improvise. Now that I've removed most of my seam allowance, I can finally pin the top edge of my upper cup, again with the top side, the main side, facing up on my table, because I'm going to sew this on the overlock, applying elastic on the entire edge. I will repeat the process for the second. Okay, so this is not going to be in order, but I really need to explain some stuff and I really need you to pay attention on the next few minutes. So I started the video and I was going and telling you to sew it until you have the upper cup of your bikini sewn together and it was ready. And the way it was going, I was going to apply the same method that I applied on the bra for the Snow Flake. You can watch the video and you will see how I sewed the top cup to the lower cups, hiding the seams everywhere. So it's enclosed seams and they are sewn together. And this is what I was going for on my bikini top. But then I forgot that this time I wanted to add a strap, and I want the strap to be between the two fabrics. And to do so, instead of sewing this just like we did here, I had to remove the zigzag and I had to remove the overlock threads. And now I have the opening to place my strap. So now that I have this and I have my straps sewn with the elastic, I'm going to reverse them to the right side and I'm going to align the strap inside here. Once it's reversed, I'm going to insert it here, I'm going to secure it, and I'm going to do exactly the same that we did, but with the strap already in place. But the thing is that when we want to combine the upper cup with the lower cup, my intention was, as I shown you on the bra, was to have all my seams enclosed. And so when we sewed them on the vertical seam, we sewn them all the layers together. But this is the best way if your straps are thin and you are able to tuck them in when they are sewn in place, to tuck them in between the fabrics, which with a bulky strap like this one I doubt that it will be possible to do so. I'm sure you will understand much better what I'm explaining if you watch the bra pattern and you see that when we combine the upper cup with the lower cup, to hide the seam between the upper cup and the lower cup, we do a sandwich. So we place right sides facing together. Imagine this is a line like so. And then we do a sandwich, and of course this goes inside, we roll it, this goes inside, and then we sew this edge here. And then we'll using one of the holes on the side, we reverse it to the right side, and our cup is sewn just like we have here. But this time, I think it's going to be very hard for me to do all this sandwich because I will have my strap, and my strap is big. It's a big strap. If you have thin straps, I think it's possible, but with this strap, I think it's going to be too hard. So let me tell you what we need to do to be able to do exactly this. So if you have a thin strap, you can use the bra method. If you don't have a thin strap and you choose to have a wider strap like I have here, please follow these next few minutes in which I will explain how we can do it. And the best thing we need to do is not to combine the fabrics on the vertical seam and combine them, yes, these two together and these two together, but they would be separated. So I would have one layer of the main fabric and one layer of the lining, but they will not be sewn together on the center vertical seam here. And this would enable me, imagine that I have my strap here. This would enable me to do exactly what we need. This one, the upper cup with the main fabric, imagine that we don't have this here, right? I would align the edge and sew, and I would align the second fabric with my second fabric and sew. And then when we place it in place, they would match and they would be finished. And we still have the horizontal seam hidden between the two fabrics because we would have sewn the main with the main and the second to the second. And that's the way we should do it for this option with this wider strap. The problem now is that I have sewn my cups so well, and I have even used a stitch here to stabilize the seam, a top stitch, which is so beautiful and so perfect. And now I'm really having troubles imagining removing all this thread here, and I don't have more fabric from this one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do, I think, the impossible, which is tuck in everything inside and use the same methods as if I had a thin strap. And let's see how that goes. But we will do that on the second part of the video. For now, let's keep and following the rest of our video, and we will return to this in part 2. As for our lower cups, and we have many ways to do this, but I'm going to show you one way today. I have here my inner and outer cup. So the first thing, not to do any mistake, you should have marked the notches on your fabric with a pencil, a erasable pen, chalk, whatever. You should have marked it, which I haven't done. And because when we are sewing them, the two notches will align together, and when you are sewing, you can see if they are matching. That's why we should always place the notches. So this is my cup from one side, and now I have to cut this again. Okay, but I'm gonna show you on one, and then I'm gonna prepare the other one. So I have here my pattern pieces, and what I'm gonna do is the main fabric, you just align the top edge here, and you pin, and you align the lower edge here, and you can see that without stretching, this perfectly aligns. That's why I don't put the notch, but you are supposed to, okay? So that's what I want you to know. And then this was my other pattern piece, right? So this is the back one, which we have placed on top of the of the front of the inner cup. This is the outer cup. So I'm gonna place the outer cup also on top of the other outer cup. And now I have the lower layer is my inner cup, and then I have two outer cups on top. And now I'm going to place my inner cup on top of this one. So you have a big sandwich with 4 layers of fabric. This is, as I told you, one method. You have different methods. If you want, you can sew them 2 by 2 and have the 2 layers separated, but I wanted to do all at once, and they are all together, and the seam is it will be inside, it will be everything, the stitches will be hidden. That's why I do this like so. So I have inner cup, right side with right side, outer cup with outer cup, and inner cup, right sides facing together. And now I'm gonna sew here. And when you do the reverse to the other sides, please make sure that you will have your inner cup and you move your outer cup towards the inner cup, on top of the inner cup, moving in this direction, so that the seam will be completely symmetric to this seam, okay? And this is how you prepare the first sewing of your lower cups, the vertical seam of your lower cups. Then we can also combine the cradles and the bridge, so the 2 cradles and the bridge on this edge here, just because we need to have them combined, and we don't have them combined because, as I told you, I didn't have enough fabric to cut continuous in one go. So I'm gonna pin the vertical seam, I'm gonna pin the other one, I'm gonna sew them together, and I will have an entire piece. This area is not going to stretch because you have the stabilizer underneath. So I will do the stitch on my straight stitch machine using a regular straight stitch to do this seam allowance. But I will show you, because I will then do a top stitch to stabilize the seam, but I will show you a little bit moving forward on our sew along. So I'm gonna set this aside, and the only bit that the lower cups, the seam that I'm going to sew, just like combining the cradle with the bridges, I really don't need to have elasticity here. So if I wanted, I could sew this with a straight stitch, but since I have 2 fabrics that are stretchy, I'm gonna use a straight stitch that my machine has, which has elasticity. So in this case, as I told you, using 2 layers of fabric that stretches, it's the best option to use an elastic stitch also. If you don't have an elastic stitch on your straight stitch machine, the best is to do a zigzag. It's not my favorite way of doing this, but you can also have another option, which is cut a small thin piece of fabric of the stabilizer, and when you sew the straight stitch, you place the stabilizer here, and then you trim and you leave only where you sewed, so that you don't have elasticity on that area where you have sewn. Okay, so let's go ahead and sew all the bits and pieces that I have explained. We have now sewn all the pattern pieces, and let me show you one by one what we need to do next. So on the lower cups, you can see here that I have done the stitch that I told you, which has elasticity. So I kept the elasticity of my fabric, which is okay. I really don't need to do a lot of stabilization here on the cup. I'm fine with this as it is. If you have a larger cup, probably the best option is to line your cup with stabilizer fabric so it doesn't stretch so much, or with strong power mesh. Now I'm gonna open the fabrics, and as you can see, when we open, on the inside we will have no stitch visible, and on the outside we also don't have any stitch visible. However, what I like to do at this point is to do a stitch from one edge to the other here, very near the fold of the fabric here, to stabilize the seam, all the seams together. So all the fabrics are inside here, and when you sew that, you will stabilize that seam. I will do that using a straight stitch but it's an optional step. You can just don't do it if you don't want or you don't like it. You can skip this step. I'm going to repeat the process for the second cup. Then for my cradle with bridge, I told you that I'm going to use a straight stitch. That's what I did. Here it is, very simple. And now you open the seam and you have two options. Either you place the seams flatten like it is here, and with the seams flattened you do one stitch on each side, or you place both of the fabrics to one side and you do the stitch on top. I will open this, and today I will choose to do a stitch on each side. Again, straight stitch, one side, the other, and the same on the other side. And then you can also go ahead and place your stabilizer and then your fabric, once this is done, on top of each other. And I'm going to do a basting stitch. I'm going to sew the bridge top here, but I'm also going to remove the seam allowance, just like we did on the upper cup and the back band. I'm going to remove the seam allowance on this top here, and then I'm going to place the stabilizer on top of my fabric. I'm going to stitch them together, and I'm going to show you what to do next, okay? So now please cut this, sew these two together, and come back to the table. For my upper cup, I will stabilize my seam against my second fabric just by opening the fabrics and placing the seam against my second fabric and doing a zigzag stitch from one edge to the other here, only on the purple fabric, so it's not visible on the main side. This is called the understitch, and you also have tutorials on tips and tricks that you can use this stitch a lot of times on non-reversibles when you don't want to see the stitches and you want it to look like a reversible. And once it's on the correct sides and everything is flattened, you will see that the fabrics will match perfectly. And this is why we removed the seam allowance from the second fabric. And the elastic is slightly sticking out, so you will never see the second side when you are wearing this on your main side. And this is how we are going to finish the top edge of our cups right now. Then we also pin, as I told you before, this edge and this edge here. Even though it looks like you have excess fabric, just align them and sew them applying elastic. It will be fine, trust me. And that's it. And then I'll be back on the table to let you know the next steps. Once you have sewn the top edge of your bridge, the two fabrics together, open the seam that you have just sewn, and you can see here through this fabric, you can see the other fabric, the main fabric here. So just sew from one edge to the other with a straight stitch to stabilize the seam against your stabilizer fabric. So regarding the center bridge and cradles, don't worry if your stitch doesn't go all the way through the ends, because when we are going to secure the wire here, we will actually use the seam allowance. So it's not important if this is not going exactly till the end. And I say this because I know it's very hard on most of sewing machines to do this on these stretchy fabrics. So I have stabilized this, as I told you, and also here. And now when I lay the two fabrics together, you can see that they have the same size, and I could actually go and do the basting stitch, but not yet. I'm still missing one thing. I didn't remove the seam allowance on the top here, on this edge and also this one, so I'm gonna place them right sides facing together, and I'm gonna remove the seam allowance. This is because not only the upper cup, but also the top of the side of the cradle, these two edges here, and also the top of the back bands, all of these areas will have the understitch technique applied, and that's why I had to remove this here. I'm gonna do the rest, which I haven't done yet, regarding these pieces that I already told you what to do, and then we'll be back to proceed.